Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to answer a bit of a question from one of our viewers. Somebody who's asking a little bit about forming Bulgarian LLCs and whether that is right for you. So we're going to cover that subject today. Before we do that, if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell, make sure you don't miss out on any of our future videos. Try to produce great content for you every single day. And if you're interested at all in help with these subjects, either figuring out what is the best structure or lifestyle, etc., how to go international best for you, or help with implementing that, please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so Bulgaria is an interesting country that I've done a bunch of videos on. You can go and check them out. It is particularly notable for being one of the most tax efficient places in the EU. And this has a few different advantages to it. The first advantage, of course, is, it's fairly tax efficient, right? That's great. The second, though, is it's basically on nobody's blacklist, so it's not really considered a tax haven, and it's kind of what we would consider a midshore jurisdiction, all right? So there's a lot of places where we would say, okay, great, they're potentially blacklisted, potentially not going to work, etc. Other ones are potentially too high, right? The tax rate is just crazy. And so this is a place where it's decent, all right? So I'm going to go through with you a little bit as a foreigner. Usually what I've been talking about is, international tax planning for Bulgarians, or how to get your tax lower if you're in Bulgaria, relocating to Bulgaria, things like this. This is if you're a foreigner. Should you form a company in Bulgaria? What are the pros and cons? And we're gonna see about that. So first of all, it's worth noting that in addition to just the tax side of it, there's of course the banking side of it. And banking in Bulgaria has become more difficult, especially for non-residents, but even for residents, it is more difficult today to open up a bank account than when it was like in, say, 2017, okay? So from that standpoint, it helps if you're going to go to Bulgaria to also get residency, at least in order to facilitate the banking process. Now, does it make sense to you? So let's start with the fact that Bulgaria has a flat tax of 10%, okay? So let's use a simple contrast. Let's say you're in a place like Canada, because a lot of places have a lower tax bracket for small businesses, right? So if you're in a place like that where the small business rate is, depending on the province, maybe 12%, doesn't really make that much sense. The differential isn't that good, and it's actually less good, which I'm going to describe in a second, but at least let's start with this. So, okay, great. You're like, well, I've got a tax rate of 10%. Okay, fair enough. Maybe you're in a place where they don't have a low small business threshold, right? Maybe you're in New Zealand, maybe you're in Australia, maybe you're in UK, et cetera, right? And so maybe you are going to save on the corporate tax, okay? But you do gain some other advantages aside from this, such as the fact that there's a pretty low cost of doing business in Bulgaria. You can hire people pretty affordably. So for example, it would be very normal to pay a full-time person for a broad range of positions, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 euros a month. Socials are relatively low. It's about 20%, and it's capped. So unlike some countries where there's no cap and it can end up taking up a huge portion of the income, it's relatively low, not super low, but relatively low, and it's also capped. So what that means is that there's a business purpose to setting up a company there and running the company there, aside from simply the tax savings. And we do like this. First of all, from a tax residency standpoint, if you were to be under a tax treaty or something like that, and you are paying taxes in Bulgaria, you basically have it that if it's not clear in the tax treaty, the Bulgarians are at least going to fight out whether that money is going to be going to them or somewhere else. So it's definitely easier to attribute income to a country like this than a country such as, say, British Virgin Islands, where there's no tax. Okay, so that's one thing. What about beyond that? Well, there are a few sticking points, such as there is dividend withholding tax of 5% in Bulgaria. So really, if you're owning a Bulgarian company in a bunch of situations, you're really not paying 10% as a foreigner. You're paying 14.5%. Okay, so 14.5% less compelling, right? If we're to say, okay, well, the UK corporate tax rate is currently 19%, or it's 12.5% in Cyprus, or 12.5% in Ireland, or something like that, compared with 14.5%. Like, where are you going, right? You can also look at Hungary. Hungary has 9%. We've discussed before how in Romania we can get micro businesses at 1 to 3% of revenue. So, depending on the situation, pros and cons, right? That being said, there are some other benefits. So it is possible to get domestic banking there as a foreigner, possibly. And so that can sometimes be compelling. Now, the banking in Bulgaria, I would say, is mediocre. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. It is, just depending on which banks you go to, the biggest problem I find is caps. So if you're dealing with smaller amounts of money, smaller transfers, say under 15,000 euros and things like this per transfer, you're usually good. But when you start ending up doing larger transfers, that's more of an issue. It is actually, some of the banks are fairly crypto friendly or fairly okay with crypto, which is an interesting advantage. And so for some people that might be helpful. You're also a part of the European Economic Area. What does this mean? This means that if you're looking for payment processing, say you have a drop shipping company, something like that, you actually have access to a pretty wide range of payment processors. Now, I would say that payment processors are less useful in a lot of cases today than they were back in the day. And the reason for this is a lot of people are running Shopify stores. If you're running a Shopify store, there's a limited number of gateways that you can accept. And as a result, maybe the one that you're working with doesn't fit on Shopify's list. So do you change Shopify or do you change payment gateways, right? That being said, they did recently bring Stripe into Bulgaria. They do have PayPal in Bulgaria. And if we think about it from this standpoint, that opens up a lot of possibilities. Now, my experience with Stripe in Bulgaria at this point in time is, although they're much more risk averse there than they are in, say, UK or Canada or the US, etc. So you may have a harder time getting approved even on a seemingly very legitimate business when you're running through Bulgaria. So keep that in mind, right? What else might you consider? Well, in terms of company setup, fairly easy to maintain. I would say it's not cheap to do the books, and you do have to worry about VAT, right? So basically the threshold is 50,000 levs. So basically the lev is pegged to the to the euro at, it's like 1.95 something. So basically 2 to 1. And so that's maybe a bit of a factor. If you have to worry about a lot of VAT compliance, that could be a hassle. But then again, for the right person, this could be okay. Now, I'm going to circle back to the thing on taxes for a second and give you kind of the one maybe advantage, which is they are an EU country, which means they're part of the EU parent subsidiary directive. This means that if you have a Bulgarian company which is owned by another EU company and you pay out a dividend, it won't be subject to that withholding tax. So now you go from the 14.5% to the 10%. Like, all right, 10% might be reasonable. You do have access to the payment processing. You do have access to lower cost of wages, etc. You're in a situation where this might be attractive for certain people's businesses. And you're not on a blacklist. That's pretty good, right? So maybe this is a great option for you. So let's talk about who this is good for. I would say anyone who is in a very high tax situation, and what I mean by very high tax is, like, to me, if you're going to go from, I don't know, something like 19% to 14.5%, it wasn't a big gain, right? You're probably not in a very good position to take advantage of that. If, on the other hand, you're paying 28% corporate tax or 33% corporate tax, this could be really compelling, right? If you're somebody who's actually going to run a business there, so you're saying, okay, great, I'm going to hire people in Eastern Europe anyway. I'm going to hire graphic designers, IT people, video editors, admin people, customer service people, etc. I can do that in Bulgaria. Well, then, that could already reduce your costs and you get an added benefit on top of tax. You're in a situation where you're going to be able to take advantage of payment processing, so you're kind of like an e-commerce type business. Then I think that makes more sense than if you're in something like an affiliate business. If you're an affiliate business, you're probably doing larger wires that are incoming from you, from different providers, etc. Might not make so much sense. So I guess in general, what I would say is, for people who are within the EU, having a company in Bulgaria, let's say if you're in a high tax EU country, having a company and you're doing e-commerce, then having a company in Bulgaria quite likely could make sense. If you're in a low tax country, obviously it doesn't make sense. I would say if you're outside of the EU, most of the time it doesn't make sense, but there are a few exceptions where it could make sense just based on blacklists and things like that. So anyway, I hope that assessment gives you a little bit of something to think about and is helpful. If you have questions, please put them in the comments below. Again, if you have something specific to you, happy to help you based on your needs specifically. So you can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rajmer, link in the description below. Check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Again, smash the subscribe button. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And I'm going to see you guys on the next video.